I'm not saying don't read Hamlet, but I'm saying you might not want Hamlet to be the first classic that you've read since high school, particularly if it's been a while. I was recently talking to my mother, and she made the comment that once, when she was younger, she really wanted to read more classic novels, but she didn't know where to start, and some of the ones that she tried, she didn't really end up enjoying. So I just thought it would be cool to make a video about how to get started reading classic literature and what some good books to start with might be. So I guess my recommendation would be to look for things that are, first of all, relatively short. There's a difference between reading something that is 200 or 300 pages long and something that's over 1,000 pages long. I would never recommend starting off your journey of reading classic novels with, say, Les Miserables or War and Peace or David Copperfield. And then also that has a plot that you think sounds interesting. There are all kinds of different classics that fall into all kinds of different genres, from what we would now consider fantasy and science fiction to romance, mystery, just general realistic stories that are rooted in the time period. There's such a variety, and what your reading preferences are in terms of what books or movies you enjoy of the contemporary type will probably help you to figure out what you would enjoy in terms of classics. And then finally, I would recommend thinking about when it was written, because more recent classics will be easier to understand than older ones. Things that were written in, say, the 19th or 20th centuries, they may have some language that's a little bit outdated, particularly if they're on the older end of that. But if it was written in the 16th or 17th century, on the other hand, you'll see a lot of these and thous and really antiquated language that we don't use anymore, and it may be very hard to get through. I'm not saying don't read Hamlet, but I'm saying you might not want Hamlet to be the first classic that you've read since high school, particularly if it's been a while. So I made a list of classics that I think would be a good starting point, and I tried to include a lot of different genres and types, and I'll explain why I think these would be good choices and who might be interested in reading them based on what your reading preferences are or your story preferences in general, TV shows, movies, and so on and so forth. Number one on my list is A Christmas Carol. I think that this is a fairly obvious suggestion because, first of all, it is Charles Dickens, and I know that a lot of people who want to get into the classics have the idea of reading authors like Charles Dickens. But a lot of his works are very long, they take a lot of time and energy to get through, and they don't always have very fast-moving plots. A Christmas Carol is extremely short, it's more of a novella than a novel, and it has a very compelling, fast-moving plot that you're most likely already familiar with, particularly if, say, it's December when I'm posting this video and you're watching it as it's coming out. Pick up A Christmas Carol, it's actually really good, and I would strongly recommend it if you're interested in 19th century classics. Number two on the list you might like if you enjoy dystopian fiction, Fahrenheit 451. Now, why am I recommending that as opposed to Brave New World, 1984, The Handmaid's Tale, or, the myriad of other dystopian classics that are out there? Personal preference, really. I have not read all of those, so I feel more comfortable recommending things that I've read personally, and of the ones that I've read, it is by far my favorite. I'm also, as I would hope you could tell from the YouTube channel, I'm a book lover. And so the idea of a world where there are no books, where reading is forbidden and books are burned, that is terrifying to me. And so the idea of dystopia as a world that you would never want to live in, that one resonates really strongly with me. But if there's a different dystopian classic that you're more drawn to, go for it. Number three on the list is Little Women. Now, Little Women is sometimes viewed as a middle grade or young adult novel, but I think that it can be relatable to people of any age group. If you like stories about families and realistic situations that ordinary people might encounter, Little Women might be a great choice. And also if you like stories about interesting women that are finding their way in the world. Number four, if you're interested in Gothic literature, stories from the 18th and 19th century that have some kind of a spooky supernatural element and secrets being unveiled and things like that. Some of that can be a little bit intimidating to read at first because, they're often quite long and complicated, and so maybe you're intimidated to read something like Wuthering Heights, for instance. There are a couple that I would recommend. I very much enjoyed Dracula, but I don't know if I would recommend it for someone who's a complete beginner at reading classic literature, just because, again, it is slightly long and It's a little bit more slow-paced. It takes them forever to realize, for instance, that Dracula is a vampire, which any modern reader knows right off the bat, so it can be a little bit irritating to see the characters take so long to figure it out. But if you're really interested in old vampire books, maybe give it a try. The one that I would really strongly recommend for someone who is new to classic literature, though, is Jekyll and Hyde, or The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's a novella, meaning that it's shorter and so not as much of a commitment to get into. It moves relatively quickly. It's an iconic story that you're probably at least a little bit familiar with, but you may be surprised by some of the twists and turns that it takes. Like, for instance, Dr. Jekyll isn't really that good of a person. In any case, I'm not usually into stuff that's very dark or spooky, but I did enjoy Dracula and I enjoyed Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and so that might be, particularly with Jekyll and Hyde, a good place to start if that's something that you're interested in. Number 5, if you like the mystery genre at all, I would strongly recommend reading at least some of the Sherlock Holmes stories. They're a little bit different from modern mysteries in that they're not really set up so that you can solve the crime along with the detective, and sometimes the crime isn't a murder, which in modern mysteries it almost always would be, but they're basically where the mystery genre came from, and I think it's really interesting to see that. You also don't need to commit yourself to reading an entire novel in order to read Sherlock Holmes. You can read short stories. For example, you might start with the first short story collection, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. I don't know that I'd recommend starting with the first novel, which is A Study in Scarlet, because while it is a pretty interesting story, it has some quirks that might be off-putting to a first-time reader. Like, for instance, about halfway through they've already caught the killer, and then the second half is just recounting the killer's backstory and why he did what he did. If you are going to start with one of the novels, I would recommend The Hound of the Baskervilles, which is actually the third novel, but it doesn't really matter what order you read them in. But it is also totally okay to start with the short stories. Number 6 on my list is Pride and Prejudice. It's a little bit longer than some of the ones that I've been recommending, but it's really good. The love story is just absolutely beautiful. Elizabeth as a main character, I think, will resonate with a lot of women in the modern day because she has a very modern, forward-thinking attitude. She's very independent and spirited, and she's an obstinate, headstrong girl. And then Darcy as well. He is still very appealing as a male lead, as a romantic hero and whatnot. So if you like romance, I would definitely recommend Pride and Prejudice. And then finally, number 7, I can't recommend this book based on personal experience because I actually haven't read it. But as I was making this video, I did some Google searching just to see what other people were recommending for similar types of lists, and there was one book that came up over and over and over. And so it is actually now on my to-read list, and I'll probably be doing it for a Catching Up on the Classics video in 2022, so stay tuned for that. But that book is The Great Gatsby. Based on what I have read about it, I would probably agree that it belongs on a list of classics for people who are new to reading classics. It is, from what I understand, relatively short. It's relatively modern, having been written in the early 20th century. The plot sounds like it's pretty engaging, and the setting sounds definitely very intriguing, so I'm looking forward to reading it when I get around to it. Once I have read it, I will add a link to my Catching Up on the Classics video about it. It'll be right here, and you can find out what I thought about it once I finally did get around to reading it, and whether that recommendation would hold or whether I would amend it in some way. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it to be helpful. I talk a lot about classic literature on this channel, as well as reading, writing, literary concepts, college and study tips, and a lot more. And I'm probably going to be doing quite a few book recommendation videos in the future, classics that I would recommend based on things like your favorite TV shows or your favorite modern genres or things like that. So if you would like to make sure that you see those, feel free to subscribe to the channel. And until next time, have a great day.